They dressed me in gold before I ever spoke a word. Not because I was loved, but because I was destined to represent something greater than myself. Rome, I was Lucius Marcellus, firstborn to Emperor Tiberius Quintus and Empress Julia Sabina, heir to the throne, the future of an empire that stretched across seas and sand and blood. I never chose it. I was born into a role, into a life sculpted for display and danger. I was paraded through triumphal arches at age 5, kissed by senators who despised my father, praised by generals who would sooner see me fall than rise. I learned to smile without showing teeth, to trust only what was written, and to suspect everyone who said they cared. The palace walls were white marble on the outside, but cold stone within. My mother, sharp, poised, beloved by the people, was the only warmth I knew. She whispered to me in Greek when my father wasn't listening. She taught me not only Latin, but silence. What you don't say is more powerful than what you do. She'd often whisper while brushing my hair before ceremonies. My father, the emperor, he was a figure I feared more than admired. He ruled with clarity and cruelty. He rewarded obedience with gold and defiance with silence. I once saw him sentence a senator to exile for interrupting a sentence. He believed order was everything, that the heart was a weakness reserved for poets and cowards. He watched me grow like a sculptor watches marble, searching for flaws, chiseling away softness. At 14, I was assigned my own military tutor. At 15, my first council attendance. By 16, I was already sitting behind my father in the Senate chamber. The senators didn't know I listened, but I did. Every whisper about grain supply, every sigh about the Germanic front, every veiled insult toward my father and my lineage. My brother, Titus, was born 2 years after me. He had a face made for coins, bright eyes, a perfect smile, and a voice so sweet it could turn bitter men into believers. The public adored him, the palace adored him. Even the priests said he was touched by the gods. But I saw past the olive oil and incense. Titus knew how to act innocent while planting daggers behind backs. He knew how to play the youngest son to perfection. And our father loved him not because he was capable, but because he was manageable. My father once told me, Titus is a song, you are the storm that follows it. At 17, I began to notice the shift. My name appeared less often in speeches. I was called young prince less and firstborn more, a title used with irony, not reverence. The statues built in my image were fewer, while coins featuring Titus became more common. My mother brushed it off, saying, "You are Rome's future. Let the people play with dolls." But her tone faltered. Her words were quick now, short, nervous. Then came the letters, anonymous, planted, delivered under my chamber door or slipped between scrolls. Reports of misconduct, of coin theft from the treasury, of cruelty toward servants, even of seducing the wives of senators. Ridiculous lies, but lies told often enough in Rome become strategy. One night, a member of the Praetorian Guard, an old soldier named Varro, who once carried me on his shoulder as a child, stood outside my door and said nothing, just stood. When I asked why, he looked at me and said, "I was ordered to ensure your rest was undisturbed." It was not protection, it was surveillance. I began noticing changes to my meals, tartness where there was none before, water that left a strange dryness on my tongue. I stopped eating anything not tasted by my personal servant first. That servant became sick within a week. He died the following morning. The palace had turned. Titus remained cheerful. In fact, he was more present than ever, bringing wine, laughing loudly, slapping me on the back, if we were the closest of brothers. But I noticed he always left before meals, always avoided discussing politics, always steered the conversation to memories and childhood games. When I brought my concerns to my house, I had suspected, but to hear it confirmed. "Why didn't you stop it?" She closed her eyes. "Because I tried. And now they watch me too." She handed me a ring. my father's crest, one I hadn't seen him wear in months. He gave this to me before he withdrew from the council. He fears death, he clings to power, but in his heart, he fears Titus more than he fears you. He's chosen silence. I stared at that ring like it weighed 1,000 talents. It meant nothing now. Not legitimacy, not protection, only history. My mother whispered one last thing before she turned away. You must vanish, before they erase you. So I did. The plan was simple. One final feast, one final procession, one final night. I arranged for my steward's body to be burned quietly, claimed he died of a fever. I returned to my quarters, allowed the guards to see me drink a goblet of wine, and that night I collapsed in full view of a servant girl I trusted. By morning, it was known the prince had fallen ill, grave illness. The royal physicians declared it sudden madness, possibly inherited. Within 2 days, a funeral was declared, but the body they buried wasn't mine. It was a wax replica, draped in my robes, crafted by loyal hands. And I rode out through the aqueduct tunnels, beneath the city's bones, wearing the garments of a slave. Titus watched the false funeral from the imperial balcony, tears staged to perfection. My father stood beside him, silent. My mother, conspicuously absent. They believed me gone, but I was only getting started. When the palace gates closed behind me, I didn't feel freedom, I felt emptiness. I had spent my entire life surrounded by servants, ceremonies, and suspicion. Suddenly, I was a nobody. No titles, no armor, no guards. Just dirt on my sandals and ashes in my mouth. For the first time, I heard the world outside the palace walls. Not as a ruler, but as a man. Vendors yelling in the forum. Children running barefoot through alleyways. Beggars cursing the gods with the same voice they used to pray. Rome was alive, but I had never truly lived in it. I traveled north, away from the marble bones of the city, into the wilderness where no statues of my father stood. My hair grew, my skin darkened. I traded my rings for food. 4 months, I walked like a ghost across the provinces. In Etruria, I worked with stonemasons, pretending to be the mute son of a fallen merchant. In Campania, I harvested olives beside men who'd lost fingers to empire taxes. No one knew who I was, and yet they all knew me. In the way they spoke of the emperor's family with bitterness, fear, or blind loyalty. They didn't hate Rome, they hated the shadows that ruled it. And slowly, my grief turned to rage. Not fire, not frenzy, but cold, measured fury. I wasn't grieving my lost crown. I was grieving my stolen self. 2 years passed like a fever dream. Then, in a fishing village along the southern coast, I met General Calvus, a man whose name was erased from Senate records for refusing to swear loyalty to Titus. He had once commanded legions in Gaul. Now he claimed fishbowl coins. He recognized me before I spoke. Lucius Marcellus, heir presumed dead. I didn't deny it. He stared at me for a long time, then said, "The gods give strange second chances, over time." I told him everything. About the poisoned wine, the fake funeral, the coin with my brother's face, the way my mother had vanished from public view. He said nothing for a full minute. Then, "You are not a prince anymore. You are a weapon. But weapons must be forged." That was how it began. He introduced me to others, former generals, disgraced senators, exiled centurions, men who had served my grandfather, who had fought beside my father in better years before ambition turned them into threats. They were not loyal to me, but they were loyal to the idea of Rome, the one that existed before it became a mirror for one man's hunger. We trained in silence, planned in riddles, spread whispers in distant provinces, planted seeds where Titus thought the soil was dead. In the 3rd year of my exile, I heard news that shattered what little restraint I had left. My mother had been imprisoned in the temple of Vesta, accused of treason, sorcery, and attempting to poison her own son, Titus. They had erased her title. erased her coinage, and soon they would erase her body. That was when I knew I could no longer hide in shadows, but I also couldn't return through fire. I needed Rome to accept my return, not with war, but with silence. So, I did something few would have dared. I sent a letter to the Senate, anonymous, sealed in wax, delivered by a foreign merchant. Inside it read, "The true heir lives. Your new Caesar reigns on lies. Watch the Vesta flames closely. They will tell you who still breathes." It was signed with the same phrase my father once whispered to me during childhood, "Et sanguis loceta," and the blood shall speak. From that day forward, Rome began to tremble. Senators grew restless. The Praetorian Guard increased surveillance. Foreign governors delayed tribute payments, uncertain who truly ruled. Whispers reached me that my brother had grown paranoid, that he rarely slept in the same room twice, that he ordered the execution of 3 nobles who once served me. Claiming they plotted rebellion, he was afraid, which meant I was close. On the 4th winter of my exile, a message arrived by hawk. A single scrap of parchment tied beneath its wing. Temple of Vesta, Saturnalia, she lives. Now or never, no name, but I knew the hand. My mother's, Saturnalia, the wildest festival in Rome, when nobles drank like slaves and slaves were treated like kings. When the palace walls loosened, when the masks came off, that would be the night I returned, not as a prince, but as justice. The people danced, the nobles drank, the slaves laughed like kings. Saturnalia had begun, and for one night each year, Rome pretended to forget its hierarchy. But I did not forget, and I did not come to celebrate. Underneath the masks and music, a storm was quietly forming. I entered the city at dusk, cloaked in black, with only 4 men beside me, veterans who had once sworn loyalty to my father before they were exiled for refusing to bow to Titus. Now they followed me because of a crown, but because of what had been taken from all of us. We moved through alleys, past torches, past drunken laughter, past men dressed as gods, and women dressed as emperors. In Rome, even betrayal was a performance. My contact, a stable boy, whose brother I had saved from execution years ago, led us through a service entrance near the Palatine Hill. From there, we slipped into the underground cisterns. My mother once told me those tunnels were older than Caesar himself, carved before Rome had emperors, before it had monsters. I followed the old path beneath the Temple of Vesta, counting every step. The stones were slick with age, but I remembered the curve in the wall, the gap in the pillar. My hands brushed the damp air like I was walking through a memory. Then I saw the light. A single oil lamp burned in the corner of the lower chamber. Sitting beside it, frail, veiled, and ghostly, was my mother, Julia Sabina, Empress no more. She looked up at me. No fear, no surprise, just recognition. "You came," she whispered. Of course I did. She stood slowly, her frame weaker than I remembered. Her once bright eyes had dulled, but not died. "They plan to send me to the Isle of Stones after the feast," she said. A final insult, where traitors are buried faceless. "Not tonight," I said. One of my men handed her a new cloak, plain, dark, civilian. She changed behind the pillar, while I paced, checking for the signal. 3 quick knocks from the temple's western gate. Our path was clear, but as we prepared to leave, she touched my shoulder. "You'll be seen." I nodded. "Let them see." We emerged from the temple through a rear stairwell, just as fireworks lit the sky. Saturnalia had reached its peak. The city roared with madness, perfect cover, but I had no intention of staying hidden. I turned down the main causeway, heading straight for the imperial villa. My mother begged me to wait, to disappear, to return when the city slept, but I was done sleeping. Titus was in the great hall, hosting a feast of excess, wine spilled across silver platters. Dancers wore golden masks, priests laughed beside generals. The air smelled of roses and roasted boar. And there he stood, Titus, crowned, cloaked in purple, a golden wreath twisted in his curls, speaking poetry to women, offering toasts to himself, until he saw me. The room fell silent. A man once thought dead had just walked through the doors of the Empire. My brother's smile froze. "Lucius," he said, disbelief cracking his voice. I stepped forward. "Not dead." He moved quickly, signaling his guards. But they didn't budge. They looked at me and knelt. Every man in that hall, every senator, every general, knew what had happened. They had played along with Titus's charade out of fear, out of survival, but seeing me alive, unafraid, changed everything. "You were declared unfit," Titus hissed. "Asterisk by who?" I asked. "A boy who needed poison to wear a crown." He reached for his dagger. My men raised theirs, but I held up a hand. "No blood, not here. Not tonight." Instead, I stepped close to him. So close I could smell the wine on his breath, the desperation in his sweat. "You will not die, Titus. That would be too kind." I turned to the hall. "From this moment on, my brother is to be placed under confinement in the Eastern Villa. No visitors, no servants, no letters. Just silence." He opened his mouth to protest, but I had already walked past him. I did not claim the throne. I did not declare vengeance. I declared something far worse for my enemies: clarity. That night, I stood before the Senate, not as prince, not as Caesar, but as a son wronged. I recounted everything: the poisoning, the forged letters, the funeral, my exile, my mother's imprisonment. No one denied it. No one interrupted. When I was done, I placed my father's ring, his final seal, on the marble floor. "Let Rome decide its ruler," I said. Then I left the chamber, not to return. They say Rome is eternal, that its stones remember. But stones don't remember names, they remember blood. And mine had already soaked too much of the marble. After the feast, after the Senate, after my brother's guards turned and the city held its breath, Rome entered a silence I had never heard before. Not the silence of fear, not of mourning, but of expectation. The empire waited to see what I would do. I did not take the title of emperor. I did not declare vengeance or raise banners in my name. I disappeared again, but this time into the city itself. I walked the streets in plain robes, ate in taverns where no one recognized me, sat in the back rows of tribunals and listened to people speak of laws passed under false rule. I spoke to farmers, merchants, legionaries. I listened, and what I heard broke me. The empire was not only poisoned by my brother's betrayal, it had been sick long before. My father's hunger for control, the Senate's cowardice, the Praetorian Guard's corruption, even my mother's silent concessions. None of us were innocent, not even me. I had been raised to wear power like armor. Now, I saw that Rome needed something else. So I returned, again, not with trumpets, but with scrolls. I summoned the Senate one last time. I stood in the center of the Curia Julia, my mother at my side. No guards, no purple cloak, no titles. And I spoke. Rome has outlived gods, kings, and bloodlines. But it will not survive another generation of liars who wear the crown only to feed themselves. I pulled the imperial ring from my finger, the one that had once belonged to my father, and held it up for all to see. The empire does not need another Caesar, it needs Rome. Then I placed the ring on the floor. I will not rule, I will guide, I will advise. But never again will I sit on a throne built from my brother's lies. Gasps, murmurs, resistance. But they didn't stop me. Instead, the Senate, slowly, cautiously, accepted the motion I proposed, the end of hereditary rule. The creation of a regency council chosen by vote, not by blood. Power divided. For the first time in generations, Rome was not ruled by one man. I stayed in the city, but I did not live in the palace. I resided near the Forum, in a modest villa, once owned by a merchant I'd saved from execution in my military trial years ago. And my brother, he lived, confined to the eastern villa in Sicily, surrounded by guards, permitted no visitors, no correspondence, no servants save one. An old soldier who owed me everything. I heard reports of his decline. He stopped speaking, refused food for weeks, wrote letters in the dirt that no one could read. In time, he began talking to statues, calling them father, calling them Lucius. I never visited. Death would have been kinder. My father died 1 year after the regency was formed, alone, delirious, asking for a son he never truly knew. We buried him with honors, but not with reverence. My mother, after seeing Rome begin to heal, asked to retire from public life. I granted it. She moved to a quiet estate near the coast. She wrote me letters, some filled with politics, some with philosophy, but mostly with regret. She died in her sleep, at peace. Her tomb reads, Julia Sabina. She watched Rome burn, then helped build it again. As for me, I live not as emperor, not as martyr, not as hero, but as witness. I walk the city alone most days, beneath arches carved with names long forgotten. I hear children playing in the streets that once echoed with war. I see statues of men who killed and died for nothing, staring forever into skies that never looked back. And I write so that someone, anyone, will remember that betrayal does not always come with a blade. Sometimes it comes with wine. Sometimes it wears your name. Sometimes it is born in the same room as you. If this story of betrayal in the Roman Empire moved you, shocked you, or opened your eyes to the brutal truths of power, leave a comment, like the video, and subscribe for more stories like this. We post gripping historical tales of betrayal, revenge, and lost power every week. And if you have a story idea or want to see a different historical time period exposed, email us using the link in the description. This is Real Life Lesson, where history bleeds.